Welcome to another deep dive. We're tackling something pretty unique this time. Spiritism for Children by Cairbar Schutel.
Oh, wow. I'm actually familiar with some of Schutel's other work. He was a pretty big name in Brazilian Spiritism, wasn't he?
He was, yeah, founded a Spiritist center and even a newspaper. But this book, Spiritism for Children, this was actually the first attempt to, well, explain Spiritism to, kids.
Interesting. So we're diving into, like, the Spiritist worldview, but explained in a way that even a child could understand.
Exactly. Don't let the title fool you, though. It grapples with some serious concepts. God, the afterlife, reincarnation, the whole nine yards.
It sounds like it'd be pretty insightful, even for adults who are, already familiar with Spiritism.
Right. It really breaks things down to the basics. Like, right off the bat, Schutel defines God as the supreme intelligence behind the entire universe.
Keeping it simple. I like it. Does he go into any more detail about God's nature or...
He does. He emphasizes that God is everywhere, not just some distant figure. And this ties into his concept of prayer. Prayer is like a direct line of communication with God.
Okay, so far so good. Pretty standard religious stuff.
Yeah.
What makes it uniquely Spiritist?
Well, here's where it gets interesting. Schutel says God answers prayers not directly, but by sending good spirits to help us.
Ah, so it's not just about, like, putting good vibes out into the universe. There are actual spiritual beings involved.
Exactly. And that's a core concept in Spiritism, this idea of an active spirit world that interacts with our physical world.
I see. So it's not just about having faith. It's about acknowledging this whole other realm of existence.
Right. And he doesn't sugarcoat things either. Like, he addressed this idea of paying for prayers, you know how some churches will.
Oh, yeah, the whole donation for a blessing thing.
Yeah. Schutel makes it clear that God doesn't work that way. Mercy isn't something you can buy.
Good point. It kind of cheapens the whole concept of divine grace, doesn't it?
It does. And the prayers themselves, even though they're written simply, are really insightful. They're about seeking guidance, protection, and offering comfort to those who are suffering.
So it's not just about asking for things for yourself, but also praying for others.
Exactly. It's a very selfless approach to prayer. But let's move on to how Schutel talks about, well, us, humans. He describes us as spirits essentially inhabiting physical bodies.
Like we're just wearing these bodies, like a set of clothes we eventually outgrow.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And that leads into the idea of the perispirit, this fluidic body that our spirit inhabits after death.
So death isn't an end, just a change of clothes. That must be comforting for a lot of people.
I would imagine so. And he also makes the point that animals are spirits too, just less developed.
Interesting. It challenges our usual human-centric view of the world, doesn't it? We're not the only ones with souls.
Right. It makes you think about how we treat animals, how we view our relationship to the natural world.
Definitely. But hold on, if we're all essentially spirits, why can't we see them? Where's the proof?
Well, Schutel addresses that too. He uses this analogy. You know how on a bright sunny day you can't see the stars?
Yeah, they're still there, we just can't see them.
Exactly. He says it's kind of like that with spirits. Our senses are limited. Just because we can't see something doesn't mean it's not there.
That makes sense. But if there are all these spirits around us, aren't some of them, bad, evil spirits?
That's a common question. And Schutel's answer is pretty interesting. He says all spirits start out simple and ignorant.
Ignorant.
Yeah. He says it's their choices that shape their development. Whether they become good or bad depends on the path they choose.
So there are no inherently evil spirits. They just kind of make bad choices and end up on the wrong side of things.
That's the idea. It's kind of like, how we make choices in our lives that shape who we become.
I see. So it's all about free will, even in the spirit world.
Exactly. And that's just scratching the surface of what Schutel covers in this book. Okay, so we've got all these spirits, some making good choices, some not so much. But how do we actually, how are we supposed to relate to this whole spirit world? Do we just ignore it?
Well, Schutel actually encourages us to interact with the spirit world. In fact, he says that God allows us to communicate with spirits specifically to assure us of our own immortality.
So death isn't the end. We can actually talk to those who have passed on. That's a pretty radical concept.
It is, and Schutel goes on to describe how this communication can happen. He says spirits can reach out to us directly or through mediums.
Like seances and things like that.
Exactly. But he's also very clear about the fact that you shouldn't just try to summon any random spirit.
It's not like ordering a pizza, right? You don't just pick a spirit off the menu and have them show up at your door.
Right. Schutel stresses the importance of being careful.
Oh.
of only trying to contact wise and benevolent spirits.
So no trying to chat with your ex or ask for winning lottery numbers.
I've got it. Exactly. Stick to seeking genuine guidance and support. And speaking of guidance, Schutel talks about guardian angels, spirits who are specifically assigned to watch over us.
So everyone has their own personal spirit guide, like a cosmic guardian angel. That's actually pretty comforting.
It is, knowing that we're not alone, that we have this spiritual support system, even when things get tough.
But I'm curious, what does Chantal say happens when we die? What's life actually like in the afterlife?
Well, he says it's not as different from our world as we might think. He describes it as having houses, parks, even animals.
Wait, so there are dogs in the afterlife?
Apparently so. He even mentions that there are lazy spirits.
Lazy spirits. So even in the afterlife, some folks just can't get motivated.
It seems that way. Some human tendencies are hard to shake, I guess. But Chatel does emphasize that work is important in both worlds.
So we don't just sit around on clouds all day.
Not exactly. The work in the spirit world is less about, material things and more about spiritual growth and development.
I see. So there's still purpose, even in the afterlife.
Absolutely. And this leads us to another important theme Schutel explores: justice and reincarnation.
So what's the spiritist view on heaven and hell?
Chatel doesn't describe it in those terms. He says there's no literal heaven or hell, but rather consequences for our actions that can play out over multiple lifetimes.
So it's not about being judged and sent to one place or the other. It's more about, like, karma.
In a way, yes. Schutel emphasizes that suffering arises from violating divine law, and this suffering can manifest in various ways, both in this life and the next.
So it's not about punishment. It's about learning from our mistakes.
Exactly, and that's where reincarnation comes in. Schutel uses it to explain the differences we see in people's abilities and circumstances. He even cites examples like Mozart, who was composing complex music at a very young age, as possible evidence of skills carried over from past lives.
That's a pretty wild idea. But if we've lived all these past lives, why don't we remember them?
Schutel says it's because our current brains aren't equipped to handle the vast amount of information that would come with remembering multiple lifetimes. Plus, he suggests it's a mercy from God to allow us to start each life with a clean slate, unburdened by past transgressions.
So it's like a fresh start every time. I can see how that would be beneficial. But if we're all spirits on this journey of evolution, what about Earth? Where does it fit into all of this?
Schutel talks about the plurality of worlds. He believes that the universe is teeming with other inhabited planets, and our journey isn't limited to this one little planet.
Wow. So we're part of something much bigger than we can even imagine.
Exactly. He points to the vastness of space, the existence of other planets and moons, and even suggests that stars are suns with their own planetary systems.
Mind-blowing. But let's get back to Earth for a minute. Schutel makes a pretty bold claim when he starts comparing Spiritism to, well, Christianity.
Right. He suggests that they actually teach the same moral principles.
He even goes so far as to say that Spiritism is the fulfillment of Jesus' promise of the Comforter, the Holy Spirit who would teach all things.
It's a controversial statement, but he does offer some compelling arguments. He highlights their shared emphasis on charity, fulfilling our duties, and even points to specific passages in the Bible that seem to align with Spiritist beliefs.
He brings up Jesus' emphasis on actions over words, the use of parables, and even his references to reincarnation and communication with spirits. He even points out that Jesus appeared to his disciples after his death, which could be seen as a form of spirit communication.
It's definitely food for thought. So after all of this, how does Schutel finally define Spiritism?
Yeah, what's the core of this philosophy?
He calls it a divine revelation that encompasses all human knowledge and promotes progress through understanding spirits and their relationship to the physical world.
That sounds pretty comprehensive. But does he really think Spiritism has all the answers?
Actually, he acknowledges that Spiritism is an ongoing journey of discovery. It's not about having all the answers, but about continuing to learn and evolve.
So it's not about blind faith, but about open-minded inquiry.
Precisely. He even addresses the opposition Spiritism often faces from other religions, suggesting it's due to factors like clinging to old ideas, a desire for control, and prejudice.
He draws a parallel to the resistance early Christians faced.
Exactly. He wants to make it clear that Spiritism is for everyone, regardless of background or beliefs.
So no matter who you are, you can embrace these ideas and find meaning and purpose in them.
Absolutely. He emphasizes its accessibility due to the lack of rigid dogmas or mysteries. He sees it as suitable for everyone, including children and those with limited formal education. It's about connecting with our innate spirituality and understanding our place in this vast, interconnected universe.
It's a powerful message, for sure. But I'm curious to hear what resonates most with you personally from Schutel's perspective. So we've explored some pretty deep stuff about the spirit world. Spirits, reincarnation, even lazy spirits hanging out in the afterlife.
Right, it's not all harps and clouds. Even in the spirit world, some folks just want to take it easy.
It's a good reminder that some things just don't change, even after death. But let's talk about what all this means for us here and now. How do we actually, live this spiritist philosophy? What's the takeaway for our everyday lives?
Yeah, it's the big question. Chantel doesn't just want us to understand these ideas intellectually. He wants us to, really embody them, live them out.
So it's not just about believing in spirits, it's about letting those beliefs shape how we act.
Exactly. And one of the most important takeaways is this idea of personal responsibility. We're not just along for the ride, we're actually shaping our own destinies with every choice we make.
So it's like instead of blaming fate or other people, we take ownership of our lives, our choices.
Right. We have this incredible power to create positive change, not just for ourselves, but for the world around us. But that power comes with responsibility, the responsibility to use it wisely.
It's a lot to think about, this idea that every little choice we make has these ripple effects that go way beyond what we can see.
It's both empowering and humbling, isn't it? We're all connected in ways we can't even fully comprehend.
So how do we, tap into that power, that connection? What are some concrete things we can do?
Well, Schutel talks a lot about the importance of prayer and meditation, but he emphasizes that prayer is more than just, asking God for things. It's about connecting with our higher selves, that divine spark within each of us.
So prayer is like a conversation with our own souls. And meditation helps us to, quiet our minds so we can actually hear what our souls are saying.
Exactly. It's about finding that inner peace and guidance. But it's not all about focusing inward. Schutel also stresses the importance of charity.
And he doesn't just mean giving money, right? It's more than that.
Right. He's talking about extending love and compassion to all beings, regardless of their circumstances, recognizing the divine spark in everyone and treating them with kindness and respect.
That sounds like a pretty good recipe for a happy life. But with all these spirits around, how do we know we're connecting with the right ones? What about those negative influences?
That's where discernment comes in. Schutel warns against blindly following any spirit that comes knocking. We have to develop our intuition and make sure we're connecting with wise and benevolent spirits.
So trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is.
Exactly. And remember, the most powerful protection we have is our own moral compass, our commitment to living in accordance with the principles of love, truth, and justice.
I think that's a good place to wrap things up. Spiritism for Children might seem like a simple book, but it's really packed with some profound ideas that can change the way we see the world, ourselves, and our place in this vast universe. It's definitely food for thought. Schutel challenges us to think beyond the material world, to recognize the power of the human spirit and the potential for growth and evolution that goes way beyond this earthly life.
And maybe, just maybe, it'll make us think twice about those little choices we make every day, knowing that they might have ripple effects that reach far beyond what we can see. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring.